Hello, folks. I'm your host, Craig T. Stewart, and I'm here with...
Jeff Mayhew.
And this is another episode of What the Book. Hey, Jeff, what's the book?
Pensively, he said, Crime and Punishment?
So, was it a crime and or a punishment to read a longer book for this month?
Both.
I thought you said you like to read books, Jeff. What gives?
I do like to read books. This, however, was a mess.
Okay. Well, before we get too far, we better at least, synopsis this here. Past Craig told future Craig we're doing it live. So, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment follows Rodion Raskolnikov. Told myself I wouldn't do that. A destitute ex-student in St. Petersburg who murders an unscrupulous pawnbroker and her sister to steal money and prove his superiority through a warped superhuman ideology. Plagued by guilt, paranoia, and feverish inner turmoil, Raskolnikov struggles with his conscience and fear of detection. His interactions with characters like the destitute Marmeladov family, the virtuous Sonia, and the cunning investigator Porfiry Petrovich deepen his psychological conflict. Ultimately, he confesses to the murders, driven by guilt and influence of Sonia's self-sacrificing love, and begins a path toward redemption through suffering and imprisonment in Siberia. That's the synopsis. Kind of sounds like Soviet Russia to me.
I kind of think that if the book was just that, it might have been better. I would fair to say that you could cut 250 pages from this book and make it better.
Yeah. Why? Let's start there. Overall thoughts. Why?
Okay, overall thoughts. The first thing that I don't like about the book, and this is not fair, it's not a fair judgment, is that I struggled with the same thing that you struggled with, which was saying the names and keeping the names straight as I was reading, because they are similar and
everyone's
they're in
got three names,
and they're hard to say for somebody who doesn't speak the language. So that slows me down and that frustrates me as the reader, right? So that's not really a fair, critique of the book, because we live in different countries, we speak different languages, whatever. That's just my American privilege or whatever. Now, I am not a fan. I'm typically I don't know. I like to read good things, okay? And obviously we were diving outside of that by reading Crime and Punishment. We knew it was going to be, but it's just this miserable place with miserable people doing miserable things, and I have to listen to them just ramble on and on and on and on. And I at some point I just feel like we could have just cut and just be like, all right, let's move on to the next chapter.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit before, and I was actually talking with my mother, who did not appreciate that I said I was reading this book, and she started reading it. The same as you. There's a few of those recurring themes, like the laughter, especially in the audiobook, the laughter of the Porfiry is super obnoxious. At 1 times speed, at 2 times speed, it is super obnoxious. And I think it was about that point that I really started getting a better understanding for why the book is written the way it's written. Because it does 2 things very well. It portrays Russia from the common man perspective, from the forgotten man's perspective, as well as from the rich man's perspective in some instances, right? And it just says, this is what Russia is. This is what I see walking down the street of St. Petersburg. and he tells the stories of the lives of the people there. So that's one piece of it. And when people are miserable, they complain a lot. That's why things tend to be rambling. So there's all of that. When it comes to Rodion, our main character, he's all over the place. He's delirious. Obviously, he just murdered someone, so he's delirious. And he's leading up to it. He's trying to figure out if he has the willpower to do it. That superhuman ideology that he talks about, he did a very good, eloquent magazine article about it in the book earlier. And he actually runs through it with, I don't know if it was Porphyry or not, but what you have to think about is when someone does something that they feel very strongly they shouldn't have done, but they're unwilling to admit it, and they're trying to do mind over matter, when the matter's like, no, you murdered someone, you have a conflict within yourself. And maybe he was sick, right? And when these things happen, you get flustered and you're flailing all over the place. And thus, the book becomes cluttered because it's from his point of view. It makes perfect sense if you're Rodion that this is how things would be described. That's my defense. That being said, I agree. You could cut the book in half.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I didn't like much about this book. Like, I get the concept, right? You've got this guy who commits this heinous act, and he is trying to rationalize his behavior. He's trying to rationalize his actions internally, externally. He's trying to convince himself and convince others that he's not really a bad guy and he didn't really do anything wrong through all these different types of misdirections. And ultimately, at the end, he just confesses, and he's like, he gives in, and he's like, I can't rationalize this. I did do something wrong. I will go take accountability for it in some way. Although
did he actually do all of that?
Well,
he confessed.
He confessed, and he's given like leniency because of insanity, which again, like, what does that mean, insanity? Like, you're not held accountable for your actions because you committed bad actions? Like so, we're all human beings. We're all struggling, right? Like, the one thing that the book does really well, like you mentioned, is it describes how miserable it is in Russia. I'm sorry for any of my friends in Russia in there. Apparently, Russia in the late 1800s was miserable. And so, like, you can kind of like, you can almost just be like, okay, I can see how somebody would just snap, right? And just like want to give up on life. And we talked about this book back and forth as we were reading it. I complained relentlessly because, as you said, when you're miserable, you complain, right? And the book made me miserable. In the epilogue, which you said didn't really bring much to the book, which they describe his imprisonment, and they describe the other prisoners there and how they still love life. They still love life even though they're in there. Which like brings back to the point of like, even things are miserable, you still have to hold yourself accountable and you have to make good decisions. And this guy made terrible decisions. Like, even as a murderer, he was a bad murderer. Like, he was robbing, but he didn't rob. He didn't even like use the money that he stole. Like, he didn't even go back and look at it. You know, like, he's just like, ultimately, I feel like this is just like ego driven. It was just like, it was to prove a point, right? And I you can call that insanity, or you can just call that evil. Like, you can just call that for what it is. It's like, you've made a decision that you're trying to shape the world the way that you want the world to be, and then you're going to go be that thing to prove your point, but all you're doing is proving that you are the thing, not that the rest of the world is that thing, because there were a lot of people in this story who didn't who had worse circumstances that he did and didn't make the same choices that he made.
Yeah, Razumikin is one example of that. His college friend, and I don't know. There's a piece to this that doesn't become apparent until the later part of the book. It's that Rodion did write in the magazine an article basically outlining anyone should have the right to take someone else's life because I actually don't remember off the top of my head why, to be honest with you. I didn't write it down in the show notes here, but he basically says you could be Napoleon. He didn't murder anyone. He just killed people, and that's fine. And he had a fairly logical way of approaching that. And it seems to me like that line of thinking ended up making him quit as a college student. He stopped going to his university, and he just got it into his head in isolation that, am I a Napoleon or am I not? And he had to prove to himself that he was. Turns out he wasn't.
Yeah, I think human beings operate on two planes. There's the emotion and the reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's why we're so unique among the different species on the planet. And I think if you lean to either direction too far, you end up in a bad place. You could be overly reasonable and decide to kill everybody on the planet because it's overpopulated. Or you can be overly emotional and snap and murder your family because they didn't like your Thanksgiving dinner. You know, like, I mean, the reality is, you know, if I look at this from a parent's point of view, my job as a parent is to help my children teach them how to reason properly, help them understand and express their emotions appropriately, so they don't ever end up as an adult like this guy. And, you know, I hate to bring into the news cycle into this, but I think it's apparently like relevant. You know, just this week, we saw that murder on the train with the guy just stabbing the woman. And then we saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk as well. And I think in both of those situations, I think one person isn't the guy on the train is thinking completely out of emotion. There's no reason there. It's just reactionary. It's just there's something inside of him that he doesn't. I can't possibly come to try to understand what goes through somebody's head in that. And on the other side, this kid that decided to, you know, premeditate, plan an assassination, in his mind, I'm guessing he thinks he's reasonable in his actions for whatever reason, but he's not, you know? And I think it leads you to a dangerous place. And this Rusk, whatever, I just like...
Rodion?
At some point, I think I just started calling him Roger. Just because it was easier.
I think even in the book they were calling Razumikin Raz at one point. But yeah.
Which, by the way, that would make it easier. Like if we're gonna do a translation, you know, like there's 5 different translations. Can we do it? Can we translate their names to make it easier for Americans to read? Like,
no.
It's just, look, I don't want to learn. I want to learn another language one day. I respect other languages. I think they're cool. I just like, I don't know it and it slows me down. Now I'm off topic, but I don't know, man. Like it was a really hard book to get through because of that. And then with everything that happened this week, it just made it worse, you know, because it's just like, this is the depravity that he was talking about, you know, in this book. This is what they were living through in Russia at this period of time. And it's almost sad that we're having similar instances happen where we live. And I know we've had them before. This isn't necessarily new. Violence happens everywhere. Humans are humans, and they lean too far one direction or another. But I think it's important for our society to understand that, like, there is no perfect answer to any question, and there is no perfect way to be. There is no ideology that you're gonna like be able to create on your own and shape humanity to be different or better than it is. We are who we are.
Yeah.
And I don't know. This guy was evil, not insane. And he deserved to rot in prison for the rest of his life, as far as I'm concerned. Not 8 years.
Brings up a question that I forgot to write down, but I know it's in. I wrote it down in this here somewhere in a highlighter format. Are there any good parents in this book?
Not that I saw. I mean, I think it's hard to be a good parent sometimes in situations because, like, it's hard to be a good parent anywhere at any time. And I think the more dire or difficult your circumstances are, the more challenges you face, the harder it becomes. Plus, a lot of that is determined on your parents. Like, if you were raised by a bad set of parents, then you are modeled that behavior, and that's what you do to your children. And it's like, that's what the kids talk about these days. You got to break the cycle, right? Like, you got to break the cycle.
There's one thing Russia's good at is maintaining the cycle.
Well,
ever since the Mongols came through, it's like we do things this way ever since.
Right. And I think overall, some of that break the cycle in modern day terminology is like kids that were held accountable, that didn't want to be held accountable, that are frustrated that they were held accountable, and they're looking for somebody to blame. And maybe they weren't held accountable the way that they wanted to be held accountable, but that's nitpicking, because ultimately, again, back to like, what's your responsibility as a parent? Your responsibility as a parent is to teach these basic concepts, and you can judge how they were taught. But what's important is that they get taught, because if they don't get taught, that's where you get somebody like this. That's where you get somebody on the train stabbing somebody in the neck. That's where you get somebody premeditating an assassination plot, or some lunatic axe murdering his neighbor, and not even reaping the rewards of the money stolen,
When he and his family desperately needed money, and his sister was effectively getting an arranged marriage for money, which I don't know if you remember enough of that particular circumstance, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Was Rodion's sister, Dunechka, really happy with the arrangement with Lucian? Like, she said she was.
I mean, I don't think that she knows. I think there's a duality to it. I'm losing my freedom. I'm losing my freedom to choose who to be married with. However, I'm also receiving safety and security, stability, which ultimately is what most people want anyways. You want to be able to choose your safety, comfort, and stability, but I think people would typically choose to have it over not have it. They'd rather be unfree and be stable than to be free and in an unstable situation.
Yep.
So I think it's both.
I would have to agree with you, because when I was looking at it, like, I put, is she lying when she tries to combat Rodion? Which, whenever Rodion is like, seems to be making reasonable sense or on a roll, you can't stop him. Like, none of the characters can stop him. He's just a steamroller going through. But when she continues talking, and I'm not gonna like read it, but I put, she doth protest too much, but she's probably right. Probably telling the truth. Where's this line? Uh, there, then wouldn't it be heartless of you to speak to me like this? That's tyranny, coercion. I run the risk of ruining it for myself. I haven't killed anyone. Now why are you looking at me like that? Why have you gone so pale? Radya, what's wrong? Radya, my dearest.
He's like, I'm not really a bad guy. I'm offering you security and stability. Why can't you love me?
Well, we find out later that he was actually a bad guy. He was doing it because he was taking pity and wanted to make his name better. And then he went around and tried to get someone else in trouble. Was it Sonia or I forget who it was off the top of my head. But he slips them $100 bill instead of the $10 or something, and then accuses them of theft. Not a good guy.
True, but in the moment, his argument is reasonable. Now, we talked about that already. When things are too reasonable, they're kind of insane too, right? And
yeah.
I think that's
ear perk up.
Yeah, well, and that's the point is like, I hear what you're saying, but I look at your demeanor, I look at the way you behave, and something doesn't add up.
Mm-hmm. 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 Going to change topics, because I know you don't want to talk about this too much. When did you realize Porphyry knew Rodyan was the murderer?
So when did I realize it?
Yep. For me, it was page 309. Like, I might have, I think I had some ideas beforehand, but it was page 309. It's like, okay, this man knows, but I don't know that he knows. I didn't know that until much later.
I kind of always felt he knew, you know, like I don't think I had a page, but I do remember that page specifically because I had stopped on that page for quite some time, actually. I read to that page and it sat for a whole week before I picked it back up. So, like, it's funny that you, like, pinpoint that page. And I track all of my writing, so, like, I know what page I was on, or all of my reading. So, I know what page I was on. And I definitely, at that point, was thinking, maybe it was that page, maybe it was before, but, like, some period of that, I was already like, yeah, he knows. He knows that he knows. And I think that he knows that he knows that he knows.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, looking at this page, because I just wanted to double check before I talked about it, it's actually an indirect thing, because it's actually the other man, like this older man in the story that's like tangentially related. It's not actually the detective himself, but he knows because he listened through the door or the wall, something like that. As Sonia heart is broken by Rodyan telling her. But that made me like pause for a moment and go, no, Porphyry knows. And if he didn't know before now, this man will tell him. Because it's all connected. Because it's all connected. Everyone in this story is related in some way. Like the drunk at the beginning that ends up dead, he's related to most of the events that take place in the middle of the book. Just keeps going.
So here, I got a question for you. What's wrong with Sonia? That she wants to be with this guy who axe murdered people.
He's a fixer-upper. Honestly, I think that is like a concise way of putting the answer, because it's clear that for all of her flaws, she's trying to be a good, loving, caring Christian person in a time and place where that's just not relevant um, to everyone else. And she sees that Rodion is struggling. So much so that he's like, read this Bible, right? And she's really confused by the whole thing, but at the same time, like, clearly he's going through something. I need to help him. And that just over time compounds until you're helping someone that you know's murdered someone, and you're willing to live in Siberia until they're out of prison.
Yeah, I think, obviously as a Christian, forgiveness is key. However, I think that there is forgiveness for those who take accountability for himself. Again, you're human, you're not Jesus. And it is, I don't know, for me, it's hard to forgive people when they don't hold themselves accountable. And I think that when you forgive people and they don't hold themselves accountable, you're almost enabling their behavior. And, for her, I think you're right. She is trying to do the virtuous and right thing. But there's probably an element of self-loathing and self-pity into that as well. Where she feels like, I mean, we know a little bit about her, but we don't know a ton about her. Maybe there's a reason that she wants to forgive this guy. Maybe there's awful things in her past or that she's attached to that she, I don't know, is willing to forgive this guy with. And then, like, in back to the epilogue a little bit, if I remember correctly, she doesn't even bring the Bible to the prison. He has to ask for the Bible, and he's almost a little disappointed that she's not trying to get him to read it. So,
yeah,
I think
I didn't think about that, but yeah,
why? Like, if you're a Christian and you're trying to forgive and you're trying to do the right thing, why are you not bringing the Bible? Why are you not in the Word daily with this guy, trying to bring him to Christ and save his soul? It almost speaks to some sort of other motive that's being masked by this, and I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know either, if I'm being honest. But it's an interesting thought. By the time I got to the epilogue, I was pretty much done.
I could see that.
So, like, I'm sure I missed a few things worth noting. Well, I guess I did have a note in there.
I think that was the most notable thing in the epilogue, personally.
An overly long book, but it's one of the greats. It exists for a reason.
Says who? Says who?
People with degrees.
Look, people with degrees, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Degree. Who decides? What's the degree?
You don't have a reasonable response to that. It's all emotion, Jeff.
And you know what? Your piece of paper is all reason. It's just made up, man. Like, you just made it up. Your degree is made up.
It's one of the great literary writers of Russia. I don't know if the book itself is one of the greatest.
Have you ever read anything else by him?
No, not in physical form.
I mean,
indirectly a little bit.
I don't know if I want to, if anything. I don't know if this is him or if, like, now what I'll give him credit for here is if his writing is different in other books, then this is masterful to be able to pull this off. But to me, it just seems like somebody who really needed an editor. He really needed somebody to say, hey, look, you've got something special here.
He submitted these to magazines
No, I
That
understand.
someone had to have edited it, or they
Well,
just slapped it in there. I don't know.
well, I get it. A modern day editor, he needs a modern day. I could go through and edit this book and make it better. I could trim a lot of the dialogue out, a lot of the like, and just make it simpler. I change the names. There is look, the point of the book, the concept of it, it is worth talking about, it's worth discussing, and in order to do that you have to read it, but it's excruciating to read, which means that less people are going to talk about it and less people are going to discuss it. And so if you're a writer, then your objective becomes write something better that people want to read. But again, this is 100 years later, more than 100 years later, I think. When was this published? Yeah.
1886.
So, yeah.
Civil War.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. It's a different time. You didn't have TV back then. So, like, you were bored. Life was miserable. You needed something to do. And listening to these people complain, I guess, was entertaining. I guess it's like...
I think there's an element of the realism of Dostoevsky, every magazine having something to say in this weird story, while also touching on the current issues of the day. Yeah. Right? I think of a little bit of like Common Sense. Why did that sell so well? Because everyone in America cared about that. It was a current topic. They all wanted to know what was going on. Like, you go and read that today, and it's like, there's not very much of this that actually is super useful outside of this time period. Right. It's a lot of details that it's just like, I don't need to think about kings or anything, because this guy did that 250 years ago.
True.
But we went over our 30-minute mark. I know you didn't want to go past that for the book.
Well, it took up so much of my time already. So.
Oh. So you want to talk about season 3?
Yeah, let's talk about season 3.
So season 3, we've got a lot of science fiction here again, but we're also mixing in some new authors in 2026. Next month, so October, and in November, we're doing Orson Scott Card back to back to finish up the Shadow series, Shadow of the Giant and Shadows in Flight. And then in December, Jeff's taking a break, and I'm trying to get Hannah from last year to do Emergence Fall of the West, which also means I have to reread my own book and probably find some errors in it, because that's what we do as authors. And that will close out 2025. But then we are going another 9 books. Is it 9? Yeah, 9 books in 2026. Jeff, if you want to talk a little bit about the next ones.
So we have The Quiet American by Graham Greene. It's a British journalist who discusses Vietnam, from my understanding. I haven't obviously read the book. It came up in some of my study of the Vietnam War. I thought it was very interesting, so I wanted to read it. The Man in the High Castle. We read Philip K. Dick in the first season. I'm a big Philip K. Dick fan. I watched the show on Amazon Prime, which I very much enjoyed, and I've always wanted to read the book. Then Mere Christianity, which I read Screwtape Letters earlier this year, and I bought Mere Christianity, and I've been wanting to read it. So this is a good opportunity to kind of to get onto that.
Yep, something not quite fiction that we can dive into. A little bit of philosophy in a way.
Yeah, and the next one is kind of philosophy too. In April, we're going to be reading Zen and the Art of the Motorcycle Maintenance. I think my brother actually bought me this book years ago, and
that sounds right.
He's not a reader, but he does ride motorcycles and he does maintenance them.
Yeah.
So
I remember you talking about that. This has been on our list for 2 years.
Yeah.
So we finally said let's put it in there.
And this is another longer book, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's not Dostoevsky's 500 and something pages, but I think it's around 300 or so.
Yeah, it's more manageable.
Yeah. And then, do you want to do the next one?
Yep. History of the World in 6 Classes. This is another one of the nonfiction books. I've actually read it before, but it is a fascinating read, in my opinion. It covers 6 different beverages and why their invention or their mass production completely changed the world. And it is super interesting if you want to know why, like, coffee and tea or beer came into existence, right? And it goes all the way back to the beginning of human civilization. And then that's in May. In June, there's Catcher in the Rye. I know this is another one Jeff wanted to read that we've been thinking about for quite a while. It looks like a good book to read. I just haven't gotten around to doing it in my personal time. So it'll be really good to do that in June.
Yeah, I've always wanted to read Catcher in the Rye. It's been a long time coming for me. It's always one of those ones that sits on my shelf. And it's funny, I've bought so many copies of it. My kids have taken it and read it, and I haven't taken it and read it. And, sometimes, I'm sure it's the same for you when you're a reader. You always are buying books. You never get enough time to read all the ones. And sometimes you have to, I don't know, incentivize or create opportunities to read them, and that's what we're doing here. And then back to the history of a glass. I love little short historical pieces like this. I'm really excited to read that book.
Yep. It's a fascinating book. No Longer Human in July. I believe this is one that we just added, right?
Yeah. So I read this actually last year. It's a really easy read. I read it right after we did Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut, and I think I texted you and I was like, we need to read this book in next season because it is a better version of Breakfast of Champions, in my opinion. So I'm excited to read that.
So I will be the judge of that. All right. And then the last one is As I Lay Dying in August. And I don't actually know much about this book.
Neither do I. I think we were trying to figure out the last book. We were going back and forth trying to pick something. And we came across Faulkner, who's obviously a very famous author. Mm-hmm. And I liked the story of this. I love relationship stories, the intricacies inside of families and dynamics and stuff like that. And that's kind of what it sounds like this is. And, kind of like the Salinger book, it's almost like if you're a heavy reader like we are, it kind of feels like you should have at least read something by Faulkner, So I wanted to get it on the list. There was another book that we were looking at by him as well. We decided this one because it just fit our style a little bit better.
Yeah, it fit our style and our schedules that we're anticipating for next year.
True. So out of this list, which one are you most excited to read?
Most excited to read?
Yeah.
Well, there's quite a few I've already read before. I think I would say of the ones here, probably Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, simply because I've heard multiple people multiple times tell me how great of a book it is. And it's like, maybe I should actually sit down and read that book. Jeff, put it on the list.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the one I'm most looking forward to that I haven't read.
I'm looking forward to finishing off the Shadow series.
The Shadow series.
How much I love Orson Scott Card. Which, by the way, I don't know if he listens to our podcast or not, but he's retweeted or liked a few of our tweets when we posted about some of the last books. So that's pretty cool. And if you're listening, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
And I think the book if it's not the Shadow series, the book I'm looking forward to the most would be The Quiet American, only because in my day job I study history, and I think it's important when you study history and you're reading the facts about what actually happened, that you need to read the reflections of the people who watched it happen, and really to get a really good understanding, the depth about stuff like that. So this just again makes my life easier because I'm able to like combine two projects into one, and in that way I get more stuff done. One of the other books I really want to put on our list, but we don't have the time to read, would be Gone with the Wind. I study the antebellum period a lot, and I've always wanted to read Gone with the Wind. It's another one of those books that sits on my shelf, getting dusty, just waiting for me to devour it one day, and hopefully that day will come sooner than later.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so. I don't know. Maybe there's a way we can do more next year without saying too much.
What would be cool if we did an abbreviated season where like maybe for like, not obviously the upcoming season, but the next season, instead of doing one book a month, we do like 3 books for the year. And I would love to read like Les Miserables, Gone with the Wind, and I know you've wanted me to read Atlas Shrugged. And because those are all hefty reads, they're going to take more than a month. And, I could never keep up that pace all year. I mean, I could keep up that pace if I wasn't doing other reading, but I would never be able to handle that if we were doing those books month by month. But if we only did 3 for the whole year, maybe. But then I feel like we're not putting out enough content.
Well, we could do a hybrid. Where you do 9 months, 9 books, and then
one big one.
One big one in December.
Yeah. Well, December's always been a hard month for me to do. I'm again, last year I didn't do December because my schedule was crazy. And this year I'm not doing December because I'm having hip surgery at the end of November. And I just, I'm anticipating not having as much time to do things. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But we've got the list. It's there.
Yeah. I'll put together a graphic and we can post it on social media so people can follow along and they can pre-buy the books. And, maybe you don't want to read all the books with us, and that's cool. Maybe you've already read some and you want to get a head start on some of the others. That way you can know what it is and, listen.
Yep. Any final words?
Yeah. Less words from Dostoevsky. Man.
Fyodor Dostoevsky.
This is why this book was so hard for me. I'll tell you this. You know what people tell me all the time? Like I've read 50 books this year so far. And sometimes I'll read like 4 books in a week and somebody will be like, "You are insane. Like you're so much, you're like, they're just hurling compliments at me and telling me how smart I am." And all I think is like, I'm not really that smart. I'm not really, I just spent a lot of time doing this thing. I'm very dedicated to it, but I'm not special at all. And the proof is me reading this book. This book was hard, so hard for me. I had to reread pages. I got distracted and lost. Like, this was a difficult book for me to read. I'm not any better than anybody else. I just, it's just my passion. Everybody has their passion. And, if you wanted it to be yours, it could be yours too. But I don't blame you if you don't want it to be because, it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I don't read so many of my books is because I buy books in bulk when I'm interested in a subject, like, I don't know, quantum computing or psychology. So now I have 10 to 15 books. I go, oh, I should probably read those. But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in economics now.
Yep.
Or, I don't know, maybe I'm interested in Russian literature because I'm a masochist. I don't know.
That's funny. And for the listeners out there, I'd be curious. Please give some feedback on this because I do something similar. I get into a subject, right? And what I'll do is I'll typically buy, like you said, 4 or 5 books on that subject. And my intent is I'm going to read all of these books, but I'll read 2 or 3 of them and I'll be like, I'm kind of burnt out on this subject. I've learned a lot about this subject in a very short amount of time. I need to learn about, and the other thing is while reading that thing, I learn about something else that now I need to read to better understand this thing. And it's like, I'm going to come back to that later. And sometimes I do come back to that, right? Like part of this list that we have that for next season is me trying to come back to things like The Quiet American. That was part of my Vietnam study that started back in February of last year. It's been on, I bought that book then, and you know, it's just one of those books I never got around to, and now I have an opportunity to come back to it. So if you're a reader out there like we are, do you find yourself doing the same thing? Do you bulk up on your buys, only get through a little bit of it, and then do you make a plan to come back to it, or do they just sit and get dusty?
And not just for physical books, but digital books and audiobooks. Because I don't know about you, but I have a really big not read on Audible list too. Part of that is you add all the free ones and then they're in your library. It's like, oh no, I have to read all of those now. But yeah, I'm curious. Let me know your thoughts.
Well, that's all we have for now, folks. Let us know in the comments what stuck out to you most. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And for those tuning in on Spotify and Substack, please like and share.
For those on YouTube, kindly give us a thumbs up.
And you can check out the Substack version of this podcast for older episodes and future books we're looking at reading together. And you can find all links for What the Book at craigtstewart.com. With all that said, have a good one, folks.
Peace and love.